Masechet Yevamot, Daf Kof Yod Bet. The Mishnah mentioned the case where a Yavam and Yevamah are living together, and then within 30 days, the Yevamah comes to court and said, hey, this guy still did not consummate the marriage. He did not perform Yibum, and he's stringing me along. The Gemara is going to explain that. There's no matter case where he actually gave her a get before he had bi'ah with her, and so now it would be prohibited for them to do Yibum, and so that leaves her as an aguna, because she can't be with him, and he is not letting her go. And so this is a problem. And so the court will force him to do halisa because he gave her a get already, and that cannot do yibum, and she has a right to go and marry someone else. So we force him to do halisa. Okay, opening question. That's within 30 days, because within 30 days we assume, sometimes people wait to consummate their marriage within 30 days. They'll, they want to maybe get to know each other a little better. They're still embarrassed from each other, whatever reason. And so that's why we do believe her claim. So the question is, who is the Tana that said this, that would agree that until 30 days, a person restrains himself, that this would apply also to a regular married couple, not only to a Yavam and Yevamah, where we would assume that for the first 30 days, it's very possible that they did not have bi'ah. Then he's restraining himself for whatever reason. They're getting to know each other. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yochanan says, this is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. We see this in the following Beraita, the Tanya. Ta'anat betulim, kol sheloshim yom divrei Rabbi Meir. This is not about yibum, but rather ta'anat betulim. This is when a man comes after the wedding night, or whenever they have first bi'ah, and he comes and says, hey, she told me she was a betula, and after bi'ah there was no blood. She was not, in fact, she does not have signs of her virginity, and this has monetary consequences, because the ketuvah for a betula is much more than a non-betula, and therefore 200 zuz instead of 100 zuz, and therefore he says, I don't want to pay her ketuvah. This is false pretense, and so I'm out. So this is a claim. Now, when do we believe the claim? Rabbi Meir says within 30 days. We believe his claim, even though it's not after the wedding night. Maybe it's a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks after. It could very well be that they waited and didn't consummate right away. That makes sense. After 30 days, then we're like, I think you're just lying. Maybe you just now decided you don't like her anymore and you want to get your money back, and then you're making a false claim. But within 30 days, if he comes right away, we do believe him. That's Rabbi Meir. So you see, Rabbi Meir makes sense. He assumes that a person may restrain himself for 30 days, and that's what he would say here also in our Mishnah. As opposed to Rabbi Yosef Omer, nistera le'altar, lo nistera af lachar kama shanim. Rabbi Yosef says it's not an exact cutoff day of 30 days. We just see if they were secluded together. If we see, maybe there's witnesses that see that they were in yichud, they were secluded together. So then we can assume probably they had bi'ah, because as soon as they're secluded, they've been waiting, they've been going out, they were engaged, now they got married, so they probably had bi'ah. So he has to come and make the claim immediately. If they were not secluded, maybe they were in different countries during the time, or she was in his father's house, whatever reason, they were not actually living together. Then even if it's many years later, so then he, as the first time that they are secluded, he still has a right to claim ta'anat betulim, because we can assume that they were not together that whole time. So it's not about 30 days or not 30 days, but rather after the first time that they are secluded. So you see, Rabbi Yosef doesn't have anything about 30 days, so he is not the Tana of our Mishnah. That's Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbah, however, Amar, he says, "Afilu tema Rabbi Yosef." No, we can fit with Rabbi Yosef. We don't want to make the Mishnah only Rabbi Meir. We'd rather have all possibilities open. Ad kan lo kama Rabbi Yosef hatam ela be'arusato degasba aval eshet achiv mivzaz beziz mina. When Rabbi Yosef, he made it very well agree in our case over there, where it's talking about his own arusa. his fiance. And so his fiance, he is accustomed to her, he likes her, he desires her. After all, he chose her and they were going out. And so there we have to assume, the first time that they are alone together after their marriage is permitted. So we can assume that that is going to be the bi'ah, first bi'ah. So he's got to make the ta'anat betulim immediately, whenever they are together, whether it's the first night of marriage or after many years. But regarding his brother's wife, the Yavam and Yevamah, he's embarrassed from her, right? Until now, she was his sister-in-law, Erva. He was keeping away. He didn't think about her. And now all of a sudden, he has to take her as a wife. And so it may take time. The first time they're secluded together, he may be embarrassed. And so therefore, it makes sense. It may take up to 30 days. We would still believe her claim that, hey, he never had bi'ah with me. That's believed, since he can also be the author of our Mishnah. All right. Ad shekofin oto lachalos nichpenu liyabem. Now here's a question. If she comes to the court and claims, hey, it's been already 3 weeks and he has no bi'ah with me, and so he's not doing yibum, right? Come on, in or out. And so why does the Mishnah say we force him to do chalisa? Why not say force him to do yibum? And that way she'll be married. I mean, the point is, one way or another, we want her to be able to have some husband, to have some life to continue. So why force him? Why not have the choice? Give him the choice, to force him to do yibum. Amara b'shegita yotze mitachat yada. Rav says, must be talking about a case where she produces a get and says, he gave me a get. Now, if you give a get, if a yavam gives a yevamah a get before yibum, then that does not sever the relationship. But the get does not sever the zikah, but it is effective to the extent that he or any of the other brothers cannot do yibum after that. And so, since she produces a get, now she's stuck. Can't do yibum, can't marry anybody else. So that explains why we force him to do halisa. Okay, maybe even without Rav, you can kind of explain, if he waited so long, he means that he's dragging her along. So maybe that's why we force him to do halisa. If he wanted to do yibum, he probably would have done it already. Okay, but Rav makes that unkimta. Now, metibeh, we challenge Rav from the following braita, which is going to be talking about giving a get. Now, if she already has a get, why would this braita talk about giving a get a second time? Okay, but that goes through a few cases. That's the same as the first case in the Mishnah. Within 30 days, she says, no, he didn't have bi'ah with me. And it doesn't matter what he says, because we believe her. Even if he says, I did, or if he says, I didn't, and he's agreeing with her, in either case, we will force him to do chalisa. Good. After 30 days, we really assume that, probably they'd had bi'ah, because it's after 30 days. And so maybe now she's all of a sudden asking for it. So therefore, we do the court requests him to do chalisa, because, there is a problem, a doubt that she's bringing up, but we don't require it, we don't force him, because probably he did bi'ah. He omeret nib'alti, v'hu omer lo ba'alti, hareze yosi beget. This is also after 30 days. She says there was bi'ah, and he says, no, there was not bi'ah. So in that case, he has to give her a get. In this case, because it's after 30 days, our presumption is probably they did have bi'ah, and therefore we cannot allow her to go free with halisa. And so therefore, in this case, since there is some doubt, so you know what, just give her a get and leave. But no halisa is necessary in this case after 30 days. However, hu omer ba'alti v'hi omeret lo niv'alti. He says, I did bi'ah. She says, no, he didn't do bi'ah, and after 30 days. Af al pi shechazar v'amar lo ba'alti sarich get v'chalisa. In this case, you need both. He says, yes, there was bi'ah. She says, no, after 30 days. So the reason why this is different, first of all, you need a get, because it is after 30 days. So we presume that a man is not going to restrain himself. The couple will not restrain themselves. So probably they did have bi'ah. So you have to have a get, because you need to get after yibum in order for them to leave. But in this case, we require also chalisa, since she is the one that at first said lo ba'alti. By saying lo ba'alti, she is making herself prohibited. She's kind of admitting that I still have a zikah with this man, and I can't just leave with a get. So she's making life harder for herself. Therefore, we impose that obligation because she wouldn't be lying and making her life harder for herself. Even if he changes his mind and says, Lo ba'alti, who says we should believe his second statement any more than his first? And his first makes more sense because it's after 30 days, and therefore we require get since probably it did a bi'ah, and we require chalitza since she said that she didn't, so we can't allow her to go free without chalitza. Okay, the question here is, it says that you need a get. Look, in these couple of cases, you need a get. So question to Rav, if she already has a get, why would you require her to give another get? A couple of answers. Amar Rabbi Ameh siricha chalisa aim gita. Now, Rabbi Ameh says when it says she requires a get, doesn't mean a get only. I mean, yes, she already has a get, and now she requires halisa in addition to the get that she already got. That's what it means here. It's missing words. All right, a little hard to read that in. You have to add words here. But Rav Ashi says more simply, Amad, hatam get lezikato, hacha get lebiato. When Rav was talking about a get, he was talking about a get after the zikah, before yibum, before they had bi'ah. That kind of get does not sever the relationship. It only makes it prohibited to do yibum. That was explaining the Mishnah why you have to force him to do chalitza in this case, and you can't do yibum. But since it does not sever the relationship, if they do have bi'ah after that, even if it's prohibited, nevertheless they will require another get as well afterwards. So here in this baraita, when it says require a get, it's talking about a get after the bi'ah that we suspect they probably had, since it was after 30 days, and so everything makes perfect sense. Good. Hanhu shenehem modim te'atu lekame de Rava. If you had a couple, Yavam and Yava, and they admitted we did not have bi'ah. In other words, this is kind of like the last case here, except he didn't change his mind from to begin with. He said no bi'ah. So they both say no bi'ah. Okay, good. So sounds like we can believe them. Amar lehu Rava halosula ushrula tigra. Well, since you both admit that there was no bi'ah, fine, do chalitza, and then let resolve the case. Let her go and remarry. Amar leRav sherebia leRava v'hatanya siricha get v'chalitza. Amar le Tanya. Rav sherebia says, hold on, the Braita says that you require both get and chalitza because it's after 30 days, and therefore we assume that probably they did consummate the relationship, and therefore we require both get v'chalitza. And so Rava said, "Oh, if it's a braita, I didn't realize. You're right. Then I will admit to you and require both of them." Good. Be'amine Hon, Bered Rav Nachman mid Rav Nachman. This is a person's name, Hon, the son of Rav Nachman, asked his father, Rav Nachman, Sarata Mahu. Let's say I have a case where they have some kind of dispute like the ones above, and we force the guy to do chalitza with her, or give a get, or we ask him to. What about if there was a co-wife? Now, normally a co-wife is exempt once one wife does yibum, and so once they are living together, we're going to presume, okay, good, now they did yibum, right? We don't have to watch the actual act. We presume that they consummate, and then the co-wife can go free. But now, all of a sudden, she comes to court and says, oh, wait, he never had bi'ah with me, and so she requires something. Will we require the co-wife to have something done for her, some kind of chalitza? If he ends up doing chalitza to the first wife that he took, the first co-wife that he took, then she'll be okay. But until then, right? Are we going to require, hey, you better wait and make him do chalitza with you also, co-wife, or wait till he does chalitza with the first one? He says, what? Just because we are forcing or asking this the avam to do chalitza with one, the co-wife should be prohibited? She is coming with a claim. Usually we presume that they had bi'ah. Most people have bi'ah right away. So that's the presumption. Here, because she is making a claim and giving herself problems, and adding prohibitions to herself because there was no bi'ah, so now she can't go out with the get, she can't be with him. So we are going to be machmir and say, hey, you better better do something to take care of this wife because of her claim. But we're only doing it because of her claim. If she never came to court, we wouldn't do anything. So therefore, the co-wife, we could just presume that they had bi'ah and the co-wife is okay. So don't worry about her. Very good. Okay, the last part of the last Mishnah of this perek mentioned the case where Hanoderet Hana'a, a woman, while she's married to her husband, says, I vow not to have any benefit from my brother-in-law. I don't like him. He's not invited over. I'm not going to his house. Okay, if it was directed only at the brother-in-law because she doesn't like him, but without having in mind Yibum, and then she all of a sudden falls as a Yevamot, in that case, she did not intend to prevent the Yibum, so we forced him, because they can't do Yibum, because you can't get married without any Hana'ah, so that we force him to do Chalitza. If, however, she makes this vow after her husband dies, or even in the life of her husband, but she has in mind, listen, I'm not having kids. If my husband is sick, if I ever should fall to this guy for Yibum, I'm vowing I will have no Hana'ah from him ever. So even though it's during her husband's lifetime, she did it on purpose to prevent the possibility of Yibum. In that case, the court requests that he does Chalitza. She doesn't want it. But they do not force. That's the Mishnah. Now we're going to bring another Mishnah altogether, but we'll see how it's connected. Tanan Hatam, a Mishnah in Masechet Nedarim. Barishona hiu omrim shalosh nashim yosot v'notlot ketubah. At first, the law was that the rabbi said there are 3 claims that a woman can have in which she can force the man to give her a get, and she can collect her ketubah. What are they? Ha'omeret timeh ani lach. A woman comes and says, I am tameh to you. It must be talking about a case where she's married to a kohen, and she is raped. She comes and says, I was forced, but now, because it's a kohen, normally if someone's married to Israel, and she's raped, she can stay with the Israel. Any woman who willingly is not faithful has to leave. But in this case, she's raped, but she's married to a Kohen. Kohen can't be with her anymore. So it's not her fault. She didn't do anything wrong. And therefore, he is forced to divorce her, and she does collect her ketubah. In the other cases, if she's willing, she's unfaithful, she loses her ketubah, but not here. Second case, Hashamayim beni lebencha. She says, heaven is between me and you, by which she means, even though there's no witnesses to the matter, heaven knows that you are not fulfilling your conjugal responsibilities. You're having some kind of problems, and you're not fulfilling onah. It's a basic thing in the Torah, in the ketubah. And therefore, I demand my ketubah, and I'm leaving because you're not fulfilling your responsibility. Yes, he's forced to do that. Netula ani min hayodim. Third case, she makes a vow and says, I'm withdrawing myself from all Jews. In other words, I am forbidding myself to have relations with anybody. I mean, non-Jews she's not allowed to anyway. Maybe it's difficult for her, maybe it's painful for her to have relations, so she says, I'm out. And now this is a problem because now her husband can't be with her. She collects her ketubah, and she leaves the relation. She has to give her a get. That was the original law. But then, they said there's a problem because there could be a case of a woman who will take advantage of this law, and maybe she actually saw another man that she likes better, and she wants to ruin her relationship with her husband, but she also wants to get the ketuvah. I mean, she can always demand a get, but or be unfaithful. She loses her ketuvah. So this is a way she can make any of these claims, and they go unchecked, and she may take advantage of it. And this is a problem. So they revised the law. If a woman who's married to a Kohen comes and says, I was raped, she has to bring some corroboration that is in fact the case, and then she can collect her ketubah and leave. She says, my husband is not fulfilling his conjugal responsibilities. In that case, the court will request of him, hey, please, do something, figure something out, go to therapy, and find a good a compromise solution. which would be better. And the third, netula ani min haYehudim, yafer chalko mishamashto utech netula min haYehudim. If she makes a vow, I am prohibited to all Jews, the husband has a right to undo any vow that relates to him. So he will undo his part of the vow, so that she will be permitted to him, even though she remains prohibited to everyone else, and she then will be permitted to have relations with him and not with anybody else, and that will solve the problem. So that's the Mishnah in Nedarim. Now, Iba Yalehu, a question about this Mishnah, the last case, came before the rabbis. Netula ani min haYehudim le'avam mahu. When a woman vows and says, I am prohibited of having intimate relations with all Jews, does that include the Yavam? Now, she is still married to her husband. So the point is, does it mean all Jews or all eligible Jews that she could possibly marry? And at that point in time, that Yavam is her brother-in-law. So she doesn't have in mind, she doesn't have in mind, Jews that are deceased. She doesn't have in mind Jews that are her erva. She has in mind people that are eligible. Is that true? So did she have her husband, the Yavam, in mind? Is she having in mind, hey, you know what? At any point, my husband may die, and we don't have children, and therefore, or let's say I do have children, and my children may die, and my husband may die, and I have to fall to Yibum, to my brother-in-law. And so, since she has that in the back of her mind somewhere, so she includes him in the vow. Or maybe not. Maybe she means all eligible people now. No one thinks that this is really going to happen, that they're going to have to fall to Yibum. And so in that case, she would be permitted to do Yibum, even though she made this vow. That was the question, and two opinions. Rav amar Yavam eno kebaal, u'Shmuel amar Yavam harehu kebaal. Rav says the Yavam is not like the husband. She intended her husband and other eligible people, and the Yavam was out of her mind. The Yavam was out of her mind, right? She was not thinking of the Yavam, and therefore she is permitted to do Yibum. Shmuel says the Yavam is like the Baal, right? The Yavam is in place of him, and when she has in mind all people, she thinks about her husband, and she thinks about the replacement of her husband, who may be her Yavam in case he dies, and therefore she would be prohibited from doing Yibum with him. That's the machloket. Now, Amar Abaye kibated Rab mistabra. Now, this is why we're bringing this whole thing here, because Abaye says, I have a proof for Rav from our Mishnah. Ditnan hanoderet hanamiva ma bechaye ba'ala kofino toshe yachalotz. Our Mishnah taught that if she makes a vow, I will not have any benefit from my brother-in-law, and she does that during the life of her husband. So, in that case, we force him to do chalitza. Now, if you would agree with Shmuel that says she does have her Yavam in mind when she makes a vow against all people, so too we should assume that she has the Yavam in mind when she makes this vow against him. That, in other words, she has in mind, she's for sure making the vow against him. But the question is, does she have in mind that I may fault him as a Yevamah? So according to Shmuel, yes, she does think, she is considering that. And therefore, in this case also, even though the husband is alive, we can presume that when she makes a vow against her brother-in-law, she is having in mind that I may fall to him to Yibum. And if that's the case that she does have that in mind, so she wants to be prevented from doing Yibum, then we should not force him to do Chalitza. It should be like the second and third case of the Mishnah, where it says, Mevakshin miba'edeh, we only request of him and not force him. So all the cases, no matter what, should be only requesting and not forcing. But since it's not true, the Mishnah doesn't say that. The Mishnah says if it's during the lifetime of her husband, we assume that she did not have her husband in mind. So you see that Rav is right. Okay, brilliant proof on the part of Abaye. Now we say, maybe not. Maybe our Mishnah is talking about a case where she has children. Since she has children, she's not going to have in mind that, just in case one day all my children die first, and then my husband dies, and then I'll fall to Yevamot. There's no way she's having all that in mind when she makes the vow. She just really hates his brother-in-law. Her brother-in-law doesn't want to go to his house and anything. And that's what our Mishnah is talking about. Whereas the Mishnah Nedarim was talking about a case where she did not have children, and that's why there is a difference. And so I can even explain this according to Shemuel. But we say, Aval en labanim mai mevakshin. So you're saying that in our Mishnah, in that case of our Mishnah, if she didn't have children, then we would only request that he give du chalitza, because then we would presume that she did have her yavam in mind when she made a vow against all benefit. In that case, the Mishnah should have said so. The Mishnah did make a distinction, and so instead of making this more far out distinction, that if she had and if she intended against Yibum, even in the lifetime of her husband, then we just request chalitza. So instead of making that distinction between her kavana and not kavana, make a distinction in this very case. Isn't that kind of a more significant thing to tell me that we only force him to do chalitza if she had children, and then we assume there's no way she was thinking about yibum. But if no children, then we should. Then it's only a request, because we can presume that she did have him in mind. So it's very hard to read this this distinction into the words of the Mishnah. Ela shema mina lo shena yesh labanim velo shena en labanim kofin oto kerav shema mina. Rather, since the Mishnah does not make this distinction, it makes sense that this distinction is not true, and it doesn't make a difference if she has children or does not have children. We do force him because we assume, like Rav, that she is not having her husband in mind, not having the avam in mind when she makes the vow, not in either case. Shema mina, and so we bring a proof from our Mishnah for that case as well. Hazran alach bet shamai chazakim uberuchim, for completing the 13th perek, and now we go on to the 14th perek. This is a short perek. It's only going to be 2 dapim, and we bring all of the mishnayot right up front. So we're going to talk about lots of different cases, pretty much every possible combination of deaf and competent people, whether they are sisters or not related to each other. So we begin with a simpler case: Cheresh shenasa pikachat upikeach shenasa chereshet. If either of the couple are deaf. Im rasa losi yosi, im rasa lekayem yekayem. So if either of the couple are deaf, then this marriage is only midrabanan. Generally, the rule is that a deaf person cannot give a get, but a deaf woman can receive a get, because it can be given against her will in Talmudic times. Here, however, if they want to divorce, they can. And if they want to stay married, they can. What's the reason? Because the same way they got married is the same way they got divorced. They got married through some kind of sign language, right? That says Hareb Mikudeshit, even though they couldn't speak, and so too they'll get divorced by some sign language. So whatever the level of marriage is, even if it's only a Dirabanan level, because it's only a Dirabanan level, therefore he can give a get, even if he is deaf. He can give a get at that Dirabanan level, and whatever they did to begin with will work to get out. So all that's fine. Here's the problem. If they were both competent when they got married, and only then she became deaf, if he wants to give her a get, he can, because a get can be given against her will, so she doesn't have to have competence of mind in order to receive a get. And if he wants, he can stay married. There's nothing wrong with staying married. Nishtatet lo yosi. But if she becomes insane during the marriage, so then that's a problem, because they were married when they were both competent, so it's a biblical level marriage. And here the rabbis were afraid, different from chereshet, they were afraid that if the woman who is not sane will be divorced, then other men will come and abuse her, because she's not of capable mind of keeping herself safe. And therefore they said, okay, your wife became insane, sorry, you have to protect her. That's part of the part of your obligation. You cannot divorce her. Where a deaf woman, she'll be able to figure something else out. Nitcharesh hu o nishtata eno mosi olamit. If he's the one that either became deaf or he became insane, then he does not have the mental capability of giving a get, and therefore they have to remain married. There is no way to break that marriage. Now, we have machloket. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Mipnei ma ha'isha shenitcharesha yos'a, v'ha'ish shenitcharesh eno mosi. Why are you telling me that a woman who became deaf, she can get divorced, but a man who became deaf cannot give a divorce? This doesn't seem to make sense. It should be parallel. It should be the same thing. And if one is invalid, then both of them should be invalid. So he seems to want to be more machmir. But the rabbis tell him, no, not so. The man and the woman are not the same. A woman, a regular case of competent man and woman, she can be divorced willingly or unwillingly. Rabbeinu Gershom came around and said, it's not a nice thing to do to divorce one's wife when she's unwilling. Therefore, the law now is that the woman has to agree to receive a get. And that means if she refuses to receive it, then he really cannot go ahead and get remarried. It'd be very difficult for him to do so. But that's only takana that happened way after Talmudic times. So because he can force her to be divorced, therefore, even if she is deaf or insane, so it's fine. She doesn't have to agree to it anyway. So her mental capability does not matter. Whereas a man can only give a get willingly. He has to know what he's doing, be willing to do it. And therefore, if he's not of sound mind, he was not able to give a get at all. So the rabbis say, sorry, all right, there is an important difference there. And the rabbis are going to give a further proof to this. If there's a testimony from Rabbi Yochanan ben Gud Gada, that a deaf minor whose father marries her off, right? So now she's a minor and she's deaf, so she does not have her own capability, but a father who marries off a daughter is considered a biblical marriage. So she is biblically married, and yet she can receive a get, right? So here's a case where we are constructing a case that's similar. And so they say, Amru lo, so the rabbis explain, see, we can use this testimony as a proof for us. Avzo kayoseba. This is the same as some woman who is mentally competent, who gets married, creates a biblical marriage, just like a father who marries off a minor who's deaf, it creates a biblical marriage. And just like in that case of the father, she can receive a get, even if she grows up. And so she's now grown up, but she's still deaf, and therefore not fully capable, she can receive a get. So too, a competent woman who becomes deaf can receive a get. So, sorry, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, who wants to prohibit both of those gitim, we have a proof that is permitted. All right, the rest of the Mishnah will not have any machalokot, but will bring every possible case. Shene achim chareshin nisuin l'shte achayot chareshot. In this case, everybody's deaf. Two brothers married to two sisters, and everyone's deaf. Or l'shte achayot pikchot. Or if the two brothers, what's going to remain the same as the two brothers are deaf, and the two women, the two sisters, may be competent. Or the two women, the sisters, one is deaf and one is competent. But in those cases, at least the two men are deaf. Or this flip the other way around, or the two women in this case, the two sisters are deaf, and the two men could be any possibility. Either they are competent, or they're both deaf. This is actually the same as the very first case, but we're just filling in every box. Or the brothers, one of them is deaf and one of them is competent. In all these cases, what they all have in common is that they're either both brothers are deaf and or both sisters are deaf. In this case, since at least one of the partners is deaf, they cannot do chalitza. And also, so anyone deaf cannot do chalitza, so that's for sure. But actually, they don't even need to because they are brothers and sisters. Therefore, all of these marriages in all these cases are d'Rabbanan. And since the zikah that's created by one of them dying is only midrabanan, but the marriage is also only midrabanan, so therefore everything works out. And just like if they were all competent in gedolim, two brothers married to two sisters, this is prohibited. No yibum or chalitza, because a person cannot do yibum with his wife's sister. That's erva, and it's erva, so you just go free. So too in this case, everyone and all possibilities is going to be a wife's sister, and therefore they can all go free. And all that erva, although it's only the Rabbanan, but that is sufficient to reject a zikah that is also itself only midrabanan, because the zikah is only as strong as the original marriage was, and therefore they can go ahead and go free. And in these cases, if they were not sisters, if the two women were not related to each other, then that would be regular yibum case, and they could even perform yibum. A deaf person can perform yibum. Right? Yibum needs very, very low level of knowledge, and it can be done against a woman's will also. So therefore, being deaf does not prevent yibum, and if they're not married, then that's totally fine. And all this will be at a d'Rabbanan level. The original marriage is d'Rabbanan, zikah is d'Rabbanan, and yibum will be d'Rabbanan. And they can get divorced, because it's like the first case of the Mishnah, where if a deaf person enters into a marriage midrabanan, when they're deaf, then so too they can even give a get and undo that d'Rabbanan. So as long as it's all on the same level, it can work. Next case, shene achin, echad cheresh ve'echad pikeach, two brothers, one deaf, one competent. Nisuin l'shtechiot pikchot, married to two women who are competent. So there's only one deaf person, and that's one of the men. Met cheresh ba'al hapikachat. So the cheresh dies, leaving the yavam would be competent. Maya sepikach ba'al hapikachat tese mishum achot isha. In that case, he is fully married to his wife because they're both pikchim, and so he has a full marriage, and therefore the yevama is fully his wife's sister, and therefore no yibum done. She simply goes free. Met pikeach baal pikachat. On the other hand, if the other guy, the competent one, dies, leaving the yavam is a cheresh. So a yavam was cheresh. That is a problem because his marriage is only b'drabanan, but his zikah is deoraita. Maya se cheresh baal pikachat mosi ishto beget. Poor guy, he has to divorce his wife. And he can't divorce his wife because they were only married in the Rabbanan, so he can divorce his wife with Rabbanan, but he has to because he can't remain with his wife, since his wife is achot zikukato. And with the other, eshet achiv asura leolam, and the other woman is prohibited to him forever, since it is also, he was married, even on some level, to his wife, so the other woman is, on the Drabanan level, his wife's sister, and even after his wife is divorced, unless she dies, he cannot perform yibum. And so, he also can't do chalitza because he is deaf. And so, that's a problem. She is prohibited forever. So that's a sad case. Okay, shene achin pikchin, nisuin l'shte achayot, achad chereshet v'achad pikeach. Now here, flip. The two men are competent. They're married to two sisters, and one of them is deaf. So again, only one deaf person, and now it's one of the women that are deaf. Met pikeach baal chereshet, maya se pikeach baal pikachat. If the man married who was married to the deaf woman dies, so that leaves the deaf woman is a yevama. So what should the Yavam do who is fully married? Teseh mishum achot isha. Well, he's fully married 100%, and the other marriage was only D'Rabbanan. Therefore, the Zikah is only D'Rabbanan. So for sure, his full marriage will prevent him. That's his wife's full. His Doraita, wife's sister. So it's full Edva, so that will surely knock out a Zikah D'Rabbanan. On the other hand, Met Pikeach Baal Pikachat, Maya Se Pikeach Baal HaChereshet. If the competent man dies, he was fully married, and now that leaves this Pikeach who was married to Chereshet, whose marriage is only D'Rabbanan. So this is a problem because his marriage is not strong enough to be his sister-in-law to knock out the zikah. So therefore, again, poor guy, mosi et ishto beget, he has to divorce his wife, which he can do because it's a same level, the Rabbanan marriage, the Rabbanan get. Ve'et eshet achiv b'chalisa. In this case, because he, the Yavam, is competent, he can do chalitza with her, and at least she can go free. Okay, Shene Achin, Echad Cheresh ve'Echad Pikeach. Now, two brothers, one is deaf and one is competent. And the two sisters, and one is deaf and one is competent. And the deaf one is married to the deaf one. Met Cheresh Baal Chereshet. If the deaf one dies, leaving a Chereshet to be the Yevama, Maya se Pikeach Baal Pikachat, Tese Mishum Achot Isha. Well, then the one that's competent, married to a competent person, their marriage is Doraita, and therefore the Yevama is his wife's sister. So for sure she can go free, and his Deoraita relation will knock out her the Rabbanan Zikah. Easy case. But how about the other way? Met Pikeach Baal Pikachat. If the competent man dies, leaving a competent Yevama, then the Yavam is deaf. He has a problem because now his own wife is achot zekukato, so he cannot remain married to his wife. He has to give a get, which he can't because it was married only to Rabbanan level. Asura leolam, and he cannot give chalitza because he's deaf. He can't do chalitza. He also cannot marry his Yevama because that's his ex-wife's sister, which remains prohibited to him, even though it's only at a Rabbanan level. Still, he cannot consummate, he cannot do Yibum. Next case, Shene Achim. Echad Cheresh ve'Echad Pikeach. Two brothers again here. Now one is deaf and one is not. Similar to the previous case, but now they are not sisters, but rather two women competent who are not related. Met Cheresh Baal Pikachat. So the Cheresh who was married to the competent woman dies. Maya se Pikach Baal Pikachat. So now you have a competent married to competent. So what should he do for his brother? O choletz o miabem. Well, he's totally competent, and the sister-in-law is not related. His sister-in-law is not his wife's sister. It's his brother's sister. And so therefore he can do chalitza or yibum, and he's competent, so that's fine. And she's competent, so it's totally fine. Met Pikeach Baal Pikachat, on the other hand, if the Pikeach dies, who's married to the Pikachat, so now that leaves the Yevama is competent. Maya se Cheresh Baal Pikachat, but now the Yavam is deaf. So what should he do? Kones. He can do Yibum, ve'no mosi le'olam, but since the wives are not related, so he can take her as a wife. That's okay, but he can't divorce her because Yibum will create a deoraita marriage. Even if it's a deaf person, can do Yibum and create a deoraita marriage, but he doesn't have the power to give a get on the deoraita level, so they can't leave. He also can't do chalitza because a deaf person can't do chalitza, so he has to do Yibum, and he cannot divorce her ever. Shene achin pichin nisuin l'shne nochriyot, achat pikachat ve'achat chereshet. So now we have two brothers who are competent, married to two women who are not related to each other, and one is competent and one is deaf. Met pikeach baal chereshet. If the competent man died, leaving a yevama who is deaf. So what should the man do? He's competent. His wife is competent. Kones, so he's competent. So he can do yibum. Can't do chalitza because she is deaf. So good. And he can give a get because he is competent. Doesn't matter that she's not competent. So he has to do yibum. And if he doesn't like her, then he can give a get. Met bikeach bal pikachat. If the deaf man dies, leaving a deaf woman, a yevama, mayas bikeach bal chereshet or choles or meyabem. Then the other bikeach, the fact that he's married to a chereshet has no bearing. So what? That's a drabanan marriage. But this woman is not the wives are not sisters. So he's just doing yibum or chalitza, and that's an easy case. So now you see, not all of these cases have a big chidush, but the Mishnah is nevertheless going through each and every possibility. And lastly, shnei achim, echad cheresh ve'echad pikeach, nisu mishte nochriot, echad chereshet ve'echad pikachat. Now you have two brothers. One of them is deaf and one of them is competent, and they are married to two women who are not related to each other. And here also, one is deaf and one is competent. So the deaf is married to the deaf. Cheresh met cheresh bal chereshet. The deaf man dies, leaving a yevama who is deaf. So the one who's competent, kones, they're not related, so it doesn't really matter what his wife is. You have a pikeach man, and she is cheresh. So he can't do chalitza, but he can bring her in, he can marry her, yosi, and he can divorce her because he is pikeach. It doesn't matter that she is a chereshet. The other case, met pikeach bal pikachat. So if you leave a yevama who is competent, mayaseh cheresh bal chereshet, but the yavam is cheresh, kones. So a cheresh, he can't do chalitza, but he can do a yibum, because even cheresh can do yibum. Kones ve'no mosid lolam, but even though he can marry her fully, he cannot give a get. So he brings her in, but can never divorce her. All right, we got every single case, and that will end off with the beginning of the explanation of the Mishnah. Amarami bar Hama, Maishena cheresh vechereshet tetakinu l'hurabanan nisuin. This is not related directly to Mishnah, more general question. What is the reason why the rabbis made a possibility of a derabanan marriage for a deaf man and a deaf woman? We see in the cases above that when you have such a case, you're nevertheless, even though derabanan marriage, chalitza does apply to them. They can't do chalitza, but if one of them dies, so the chalitza has to be done for them. So there is an institution that the rabbis made for deaf people. Whereas a man and a woman who are both not sane, there is not even on a rabbinic level is there marriage for them. What's the reason? Now, how do we know that this is in fact true before we know why? Well, we see a baraita that says shote, or a minor, or that marry a woman. And so if the man, as long as the man is one of these, and they marry any woman, and they die without children, their wives do not have to do yibum or chalitza. In other words, we don't recognize the marriage at all. And so this shote and katan, the wives of the shote and katan, can just go free. We consider their marriage no significance. Whereas cheresh, married to a chereshet, if he dies without children, she does. We do have to do yibum, even though it's only to the banan level. We have to do a yibum for her. So what is the difference between these cases? The answer is cheresh vechereshet tekayma dekanta derabanan takinu lehu rabanan nisuin. Because when the people are mute, they can fulfill the ordinance of the sages. Meaning, when the rabbis say we'll make a derabanan type of marriage, even though they're deaf and it's difficult for them to communicate, they can live happily ever after and have a successful marriage. And therefore, it makes sense that we should, even if the Bible doesn't recognize it, it makes sense that the rabbis should make an institution so that they can live as a couple in some way. But for someone who is not sane, then the rabbis aren't going to even bother making such an institution, because a person cannot live, for example, with a snake in one basket. Expression to mean that you're not going to live happily with a snake in one basket. So too with someone who's not sane and does not act normally. It's impossible to maintain a marriage, maintain a relationship, and therefore there's no point in the rabbis making an institution for them, lo takin rabbanan nisuin, since it won't be fulfilled anyway. Okay, good. Now, next case. So, nisuin, a minor boy cannot enact a marriage. Why not? Whereas a deaf man, adult, can enter into a marriage. The reason is because because a deaf person is going to remain deaf their whole lives, and so they're never going to be able to perform a deoraita nisuin. So the rabbi said, we got to help him out, and we'll make a new institution of marriage for a deaf person. But a minor boy, okay, he wants to get married, good, just wait, and then you'll be able to do a full deoraita marriage. There's no need to make an institution especially for a boy, since he can simply grow up. All right, well then the same should be true for a minor woman. But a minor girl, the rabbis do make an institution, and a minor girl can be married. So what's the difference? Why don't we tell her, okay, just wait till you grow up? And the answer is that right there she can grow up, and the rabbis make institution. Why? As we saw before, the rabbis were concerned that if she is an orphan, her father's not there to protect her, people will treat her like ownerless property. She will be mistreated by men, and therefore to protect her, the rabbis made an institution of marriage for a minor girl for her protection, whereas for a boy, that's not needed. And lastly, how come a minor girl has the right of refusal? Why don't they make the same, since when they make the institution of marriage for a deaf person, why don't they also allow her to refuse her husband at any time? And the answer is dimken mimna'e vela nasbila. If there's always a right of refusal, then the men would refrain from marrying her at all, because a man's not going to want to enter into a marriage knowing that at any moment the deaf woman can come and say, oh, I don't like him, and that's it, he leaves. So there's too little commitment. Whereas the minor, although she can do it as long as she's a minor, but you know that there's an end to it. Once she becomes an adult, then she cannot refuse anymore. So therefore, it makes sense to give a minor the right of refusal and not the deaf person. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.